Sir, stop what you're doing and come down from the ladder.
What's going on? I'm working right now. Why do I need to come down?
We received a call regarding possible immigration issues at this location. We need to confirm your identity.
Immigration issues? I'm painting a house. I was hired to be here. I'm a U.S. citizen and I own this company.
That's what we need to verify. Please step down from the ladder and provide your identification.
Marcus Cole still couldn't fully process how his morning had unraveled so violently. Less than half an hour earlier, he'd been standing on a ladder, carefully rolling fresh paint along the upper trim of a two-story colonial home in a quiet northern Virginia suburb. His movements were calm, precise, muscle memory refined by nearly 16 years in the trade. Painting had always been his refuge, a place where patience, focus, and discipline mattered more than anything else. Now, two federal enforcement officers stood at the edge of the driveway below him, staring up as if he were a suspect instead of a contractor. They were demanding proof that he belonged in the country where he had been born. A security camera mounted above the garage door recorded everything. It captured the neighbor's initial confrontation. It captured her threats to make a call. And now it captured the surreal escalation, armed federal agents responding to a racially motivated accusation, treating a licensed American business owner like a criminal trespasser. What Marcus didn't yet realize was that this footage would eventually become the foundation of a federal civil rights lawsuit, one that would expose how easily racial bias could be weaponized through government power, and one that would cost the federal government over $12 million. But that moment was still far away. At the center of this was Marcus Cole, a second-generation contractor who had spent his entire life proving that excellence was his only shield. Marcus came from a family where working with your hands wasn't a fallback, it was a legacy. His grandfather, Elijah Cole, had been a bricklayer in the late 1960s in Dayton, Ohio. One of the first black men admitted into the local masonry union after years of being quietly shut out. Elijah had built churches, public schools, and municipal buildings, structures that still stood decades later, even if his name had never been etched into them. Marcus's father, Ronald Cole, took that foundation and expanded it in the 1990s, launching a small remodeling and contracting business during a time when black-owned companies faced systemic roadblocks at every turn. Banks denied loans, clients questioned competence, inspectors scrutinized black contractors more aggressively than their white counterparts. Ronald survived by drilling one rule into his son: your work has to speak louder than their prejudice. Marcus learned painting from his uncle Darren during long summer breaks, working under the relentless Midwest sun. Darren was obsessive about detail, clean edges, flawless prep, perfect color matching. Mistakes weren't tolerated. Other guys get second chances, Darren used to say. We don't, so we don't mess up. That lesson followed Marcus to college at the University of Cincinnati, where he studied business management while painting houses on weekends to cover tuition. When he graduated in 2009, right into the aftermath of the financial crash, he made a decision most of his peers avoided. He didn't chase corporate jobs that weren't hiring. He built his own company. Cole Precision Coating started with one pickup truck, borrowed equipment, and a single assistant. At first, it was whatever work he could find: rental units, patch jobs, low-margin exterior touch-ups. But Marcus built his reputation the slow way, showing up early, finishing on time, leaving sites cleaner than he found them. By 2016, he had multiple steady crews. By 2021, even through the pandemic, he had 7 employees, full insurance coverage, and contracts across Northern Virginia and suburban DC. Marcus paid his workers above market rates. He offered health coverage. He trained young guys who had been written off elsewhere. At 39 years old, he had built exactly what his family had fought for: stability, independence, and respect earned through work. Which made what happened next feel even more unreal. The Reynolds residence in Ashburn had been a routine job, a retired couple preparing their home for their son's wedding later that summer. Standard exterior repaint, neutral tones, clean lines. Marcus had done hundreds like it. He had no reason to believe this one would change his life. Thursday, April 18, 2024 started like the kind of day contractors pray for: clear sky, mild air, no wind strong enough to fight your ladder. Marcus pulled into the Reynolds driveway at 7:10 a.m., his white work truck parked in plain view with Cole Precision Coatings, licensed, bonded, insured, printed in bold lettering on both doors. He'd already finished the scraping and primer work over the previous 2 days. Today was the pretty part: the final coat, the crisp trim, the details that made homeowners smile when they returned. Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds had left early for an appointment in Arlington, reminding Marcus they'd be gone most of the morning. They'd even handed him a garage code so he could access water and store tools. By 9:30, Marcus was on his ladder at the front corner of the house, cutting in the upper trim with steady, careful strokes. The street around him felt almost too quiet. Expensive neighborhoods often did on weekday mornings. Most people were at work, kids were at school. Only the occasional dog walker passed by. Above the garage, a small security camera blinked, silently recording. At 9:42 a.m., a glossy black SUV rolled to a slow stop across the street. A woman stepped out, mid-50s, blonde hair pulled into a tight clip, wearing designer athleisure and oversized sunglasses. Her name was Diane Wexler, and she lived 3 houses down. The type of neighbor who treated the street like her personal HOA, whether one existed or not. She didn't wave, she didn't smile, she just stared. The camera caught her standing still on the sidewalk, eyes locked on Marcus as if she were trying to solve a puzzle. Her expression shifted over the next 30 seconds from curiosity to suspicion to something sharper. Then she lifted her phone, click, click, click. She took multiple photos, Marcus on the ladder, then the truck, then a tight zoom on the license plate. After that, she crossed the street with purposeful steps and walked straight into the Reynolds driveway like she belonged there. "Hey," she called up, her voice loud, clipped, and impatient. "What are you doing on this property?" Marcus paused, keeping his tone neutral. "Good morning, I'm painting the exterior. The Reynolds hired my company." Diane planted her feet and looked around the driveway like she was searching for evidence. "That's not what I was told. I spoke to Mrs. Reynolds last weekend. She didn't mention any painters." Marcus exhaled slowly. He dealt with nosy neighbors before. Usually it ended with a polite explanation and a shrug. "I can't speak to what they discuss with neighbors," he said calmly. "But I have a signed contract, I'm licensed, and I'm scheduled to be here." Diane's eyes narrowed. "Where are they right now?" "They left for a medical appointment." "They'll be back later." Marcus turned slightly, intending to return to work. Diane didn't move. "I don't like this," she said, pulling her phone up again. "You're here alone, they're not home. And you don't look like someone who belongs in this neighborhood." The words hit Marcus like a familiar cold hand around his chest, not because he hadn't heard variations of it before, but because no matter how many times you heard it, it never stopped feeling like you were being erased in real time. He climbed down slowly, hands visible, voice controlled. He reached into his pocket and offered a business card. "My name is Marcus Cole. This is my company. You can call the Reynolds. You can call the number on the truck." "Everything checks out." Diane didn't take the card. She actually stepped back like his hand was dangerous. "I'm calling somebody," she said, "because we have a real problem with undocumented workers around here. And I'm not ignoring it." Marcus blinked. "Undocumented, ma'am, I'm a U.S. citizen." "That's what everyone says," Diane snapped. "I'm making a report. Someone will verify." Marcus felt heat rise behind his eyes, but he forced his voice down. "So you're going to call immigration enforcement because you saw a black man painting a house?" Diane raised her phone to her ear. "You can explain it to them." And then, with the security camera capturing every syllable, she started talking, confident, smug, and completely certain she was the hero of the story. Diane didn't lower her voice. She didn't step away. She stood there in the driveway, phone pressed to her ear, speaking clearly enough for Marcus and the security camera to hear every word. "Yes, I'd like to report suspected unauthorized labor," she said calmly. "The address is 1286 Cedar Brook Lane, Ashburn, Virginia. There's a man here working on a house while the owners aren't present." She paused, listening. "Well, he claims he was hired, but there's no one here to confirm that, and honestly, it doesn't look legitimate. He could be casing the property." Marcus felt his jaw tight. "Yes," Diane continued. "He appears to be possibly Hispanic or black, I'm not sure, but he doesn't seem like he belongs here. I think someone should verify his status." The word verify landed like an insult. She nodded as if the person on the other end could see her. "No, I'm not in danger, I'll wait." She ended the call and looked at Marcus with a thin smile. "They'll be here shortly," she said. "If you're legal, you shouldn't have anything to worry about." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed a number he'd hoped not to use. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said when she answered, keeping his voice steady. "I'm sorry to interrupt your appointment, but there's an issue at your house. A neighbor has called federal enforcement on me." A pause. "Yes." "Immigration?" He listened as confusion turned to disbelief on the other end. He explained quickly where he was standing, who the woman was, what she'd said. "I'm fine," he added. "But if you can come back or call someone, that would help." Mrs. Reynolds promised she was leaving immediately. Marcus hung up, then did something instinct told him might matter later. He opened his camera app and started recording. "For my own protection," he said aloud, aiming the lens toward Diane. "I'm documenting this," she scoffed. "Record all you want. You shouldn't be here unsupervised. Anyone would question it." The next 15 minutes crawled. Diane paced near the sidewalk, occasionally glancing at Marcus like a guard watching a detainee. Marcus stayed near his ladder, phone recording, saying little. A few neighbors stepped outside, drawn by the tension. One older couple asked quietly what was going on. Diane answered for him. "I reported a suspicious worker," she said proudly. "We have to protect our neighborhood." At 10:19 a.m., a dark, unmarked SUV pulled up across the street. The air changed instantly. 2 agents stepped out, both wearing tactical vests marked Federal Enforcement in bright block letters. Body cameras blinking, hands resting near their belts. One of them approached. "We received a report about potential immigration violations at this address." Diane stepped forward immediately. "That was me. This man is working here illegally. The homeowners aren't even home." Before Marcus could speak, a silver sedan screeched into the driveway behind them. Mrs. Reynolds jumped out, face flushed, keys still in her hand. "What is going on here?" she demanded. She turned to Diane. "Why did you call anyone? This didn't look right," Diane said defensively. "He was alone." And he is my contractor," Mrs. Reynolds snapped. "We hired him, he has a contract, you had no right to do this." The agents exchanged a brief look. One of them turned toward Marcus. "Sir, we need you to step down from the ladder and provide identification." Marcus froze. "I'm painting a house," he said slowly. "I'm an American citizen. We still need to verify," the agent replied, his tone firm. "Please come down," Marcus complied, every movement deliberate, hands visible, breathing controlled. Years of knowing exactly how not to look threatening guiding him now. As his boots touched the driveway, the humiliation hit full force. He hadn't done anything wrong, and yet he was being treated like he didn't belong. Marcus stepped fully onto the driveway, heart pounding but face controlled. He kept his hands visible, fingers slightly spread, the way his father had taught him years ago. "Where's your identification?" the lead agent asked. "In my truck," Marcus replied. "Driver's license, business license, insurance, everything. Walk with us," the agent said, already moving. Mrs. Reynolds stepped forward, her voice sharp. "This is absurd. I'm the homeowner. I'm telling you he's authorized to be here." "Ma'am, please step back," the second agent said without looking at her. That's when it fully registered for Marcus. Her words didn't matter, his didn't either. They walked him to the truck as if escorting a suspect. Neighbors watched from their porches. Phones were out now. Someone whispered. Someone shook their head. Marcus opened the passenger door, reached slowly into his work bag, and laid everything out on the hood. Driver's license, state contractor license, business registration, insurance card, proof of a life built carefully, one document at a time. The agent examined each item slowly, too slowly, holding them up, reading them aloud. Photographing them with a government-issued phone. "You were born in Ohio?" the agent asked. "Yes." "You ever worked outside the U.S.? "No." "You ever been out of the country?" "One cruise, Bahamas." 10 years ago, the questioning went on, pointless, repetitive. 20 minutes passed, 20 minutes of silence punctuated by radio static and typing. 20 minutes of Marcus standing still, aware of every pair of eyes on him. 20 minutes of Diane watching from the sidewalk, arms crossed, satisfied. Finally, the agent handed the documents back. "Everything checks out," he said flatly. "You're free to continue." Marcus stared at him. "That's it, yes. You pulled me off a ladder, you detained me, you questioned my right to work, and now it's just continue." "We responded to a report," the agent replied. "We had to verify." Marcus laughed, short, bitter. "A racist phone call isn't probable cause." The second agent shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Reynolds spoke up again, furious now. "You saw a black man working in assumed guilt, that's what happened. And you didn't question it for a second." The lead agent said nothing. The SUV doors closed, the engine started, the agents drove away without another word. The street was silent. Diane hesitated, realizing too late the mood had turned. She muttered something about doing the right thing and retreated toward her house. Mrs. Reynolds turned to Marcus, eyes wet. "I'm so sorry. This never should have happened." Marcus nodded, but the damage was already done. He climbed back onto the ladder and dipped his brush into the paint, but the calm was gone. Every sound made him flinch. Every passing car tightened his chest. The work he once loved now felt heavy, like he was being watched, judged, weighed against something he could never control. 3 days later, Marcus walked into a civil rights law office in Washington, D.C. with a flash drive in his pocket. And the fight truly began. The law offices of Carter and Holloway Civil Rights Group occupied the 7th floor of a glass building just outside downtown Washington, D.C. The lobby was quiet, understated, no flashy signs, no slogans, just framed verdicts lining the walls. Real outcomes, real consequences. Marcus sat across from Elaine Carter, a veteran civil rights attorney with 3 decades of courtroom scars behind her. She didn't interrupt, she didn't react emotionally. She watched the footage in silence once, then again, then a third time. When the final clip ended, she leaned back in her chair. "This is not a close call," she said. "This is textbook racial profiling followed by unlawful detention." Marcus exhaled. He hadn't realized how badly he needed to hear that. She pointed at the paused frame, Deanne on the sidewalk, phone to her ear. "That call alone is devastating. She provides no facts, no behavior, no evidence, just race and assumption." Then she pointed to the agents on screen. "And they failed their duty. They didn't question the credibility of the report. They didn't seek verification from the homeowners. They escalated immediately." "What does that mean?" Marcus asked. "It means we sue everyone," Carter replied calmly. "Her, the agency, the individual agents. And we don't settle quietly." The complaint was filed 10 days later in federal court. Marcus Cole v. Diane Wexler et al. The filing outlined every moment, timestamps, audio transcripts, screenshots from the security camera, and witness statements from neighbors. It alleged false reporting, abuse of process, civil rights violations, unlawful seizure, and discrimination under color of law. The footage was Exhibit A. Within 48 hours, the story exploded. Local news picked it up first. Then national outlets. Headlines multiplied. Licensed U.S. contractor detained after neighbor calls immigration. Security footage shows federal agents demanding papers from citizen working while black. Lawsuit exposes racial profiling in suburb. Marcus's phone didn't stop ringing. Reporters, contractors, strangers, people telling him versions of the same story being questioned, reported, followed, assumed illegal. Diane Wexler disappeared almost overnight. Her social media accounts vanished. Her attorney released a short statement claiming she had acted out of concern for safety and denied any racial motive. The footage contradicted every word. The federal agency initially defended its response, stating agents had followed standard procedure. That position lasted exactly 6 days. By the second week, public pressure mounted. Advocacy groups demanded accountability. Lawmakers requested briefings. Internal reviews quietly began. 18 months later, the case went to trial. The courtroom was packed every day. Marcus testified first. He spoke about his family, his business, the moment on the ladder when his work turned into a threat in someone else's eyes. "I didn't lose my freedom," he told the jury, "but I lost something else. I lost the assumption that doing everything right would protect me." Mrs. Reynolds testified next, then neighbors, then experts. A sociologist explained how civilian bias becomes government action when agencies respond without scrutiny. A business analyst detailed the contracts Marcus lost after rumors spread. The footage played again and again. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous: liability on all counts. Damages would be decided next. The damages phase of the trial lasted 4 days. 4 days where numbers finally replaced arguments, and the weight of what had been done to Marcus Cole became impossible to minimize. A clinical psychologist testified first. She described Marcus's diagnosis: acute anxiety, chronic stress response, and loss of occupational security following the incident. "He didn't just experience embarrassment," she told the jury. "He experienced a violation of identity. Being forced to prove you belong in your own country creates lasting psychological harm." Next came a business valuation expert. Using contracts, invoices, and correspondence, he showed how Marcus's company had suffered measurable losses. Projects canceled, clients who quietly chose other contractors, referrals that never came. "This isn't speculation," the expert said. "This is documented economic damage caused by public humiliation and reputational harm." Former contractors testified. 2 black business owners who described similar experiences. Being questioned, being reported, being treated as suspicious for simply working. Then came the defense's turn. They argued the agents were just doing their jobs. They claimed Diane's call was made in good faith. They suggested Marcus was ultimately unharmed. The jury didn't buy it. During closing arguments, Elaine Carter didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "This case is not about a misunderstanding," she said. "It's about what happens when prejudice is given authority. When a phone call based on race triggers armed intervention, when a citizen is forced to prove his humanity." The jury deliberated overnight. When they returned, the courtroom was silent. The foreperson stood. On the claims against Diane Wexler, liable. On the claims against the federal agency, liable. On the claims against the individual agents, liable. The damages followed. $2.1 million against Diane Wexler personally for false reporting, emotional distress, and abuse of process. $11.4 million against the federal government for civil rights violations, unlawful detention, and discriminatory enforcement. Total $13.5 million. The judge allowed the courtroom to sit in silence for several seconds before speaking. "This verdict sends a clear message," he said. "Bias does not become lawful simply because it wears authority." Diane Wexler filed for bankruptcy within 6 weeks. Her home sold below market value. She moved out of state quietly, her name now permanently attached to a case studied in law schools. One agent resigned before disciplinary proceedings concluded. The other was reassigned permanently to administrative duty. The agency announced new policies: mandatory verification protocols, supervisory approval for field responses, and expanded bias training. None of it erased what Marcus had gone through, but it meant something. He didn't smile when the verdict was read. He sat still. For the first time since that morning on the ladder, his hands weren't shaking. Marcus Cole didn't disappear after the verdict. He didn't buy a mansion, vanish from public view, or let the story end with a number. Instead, he went back to work. Not immediately. He needed time. Time to let his nervous system calm. Time to stand on a ladder again without scanning the street every time a car slowed down. Time to reclaim something that had been taken from him. When he did return, it was different. Marcus used part of the settlement to establish the Cole Contractor Defense Fund, a nonprofit providing legal support for small business owners facing discrimination, harassment, or unlawful enforcement. Within months, contractors from across the country reached out: electricians, roofers, landscapers, many with stories that sounded uncomfortably familiar. He began speaking publicly, at trade conferences, at civil rights forums. At community colleges where young tradespeople were still being told that keeping your head down was the safest option. Documentation matters, he told them. Cameras matter. And silence protects the wrong people. The security footage from Cedar Brook Lane became required material in multiple civil rights law courses. A modern example of how bias doesn't need shouting or slurs, it just needs permission and power. Mrs. Reynolds kept the house exactly the same. The soft gray exterior still looked perfect years later. Near the front door, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, she mounted a small plaque. Painted by Cole Precision Coatings, April 2024, excellence endures. Marcus visits occasionally, not for work, just for coffee, for conversation, for a reminder that not everyone saw him as a threat. As for Diane Wexler, her name lives on in legal databases, not neighborhoods. A cautionary entry. A permanent reminder that calling the authorities is not a consequence-free act when it's driven by prejudice instead of facts. And for Marcus, the latter no longer represents fear. It represents proof. Proof that dignity doesn't require permission. Proof that accountability is possible. Proof that one recorded moment can expose an entire system. Some stories end quietly. This one didn't. And that's exactly why it mattered. If this story made you uncomfortable, it should. Situations like this don't happen in a vacuum. They happen because silence allows them to. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Do you think federal agencies should be allowed to act on racially motivated calls without verification? Or should there be consequences every time an innocent person is targeted? Read the comments and join the conversation. This discussion matters more than you think.